Right, welcome to the program. Charles Moscowitz here, and Michael D. Shaw is my guest. And we are doing what we often do on Thursdays live here at all of my various live streams and podcasts. And
Too
that is,
numerous to mention, actually.
yeah, the what?
No, they're too numerous to mention. You got about 30
I do.
platforms.
I do, and I'm learning all the time how to expand it. And I forge forward with that even in this age of censorship because the big censorship started in 2018, and it was kind of a setback, but we all forge forward, and we're reaching toward the end of the election, and I think that at this point, it's probably too late for them to steal it. My understanding is that Trump is crushing it at this point. They didn't expect the early votes. They thought they could pull the same trick they pulled in 2020 and 2022 by figuring that we would all wait till election day and march to the polls like good citizens and stand in line while they had already banked their votes early.
Yeah.
Because now, with elections being what they are, it goes on for months. It's not just one day any longer. Hopefully, if Trump wins, it might go back to being one day, as it should. But there's been adjustments made to the realities that, we're not going to get suckered again. And we're playing ball the same way. We have people out in the field doing voter harvesting, gathering votes, curing votes, helping to go to people's homes and asking them to vote. And if they don't vote, going back to the home and getting their vote. And there's a significant effort in terms of playing the same game that the liberal Democrats have been playing all along. Now, they have not been able to do any excuse to conduct what they did last time, which was a mass mailing, probably the largest junk mailing in history, millions of unsolicited ballots under the guise of the COVID emergency, so-called, even though it was over at that point. They haven't done it. I don't know. I don't think they've done it. Maybe they have done it in certain states, like maybe Michigan. But
not to the extent, though.
Right. And they're pulling some of the same stuff. Now this CO Cava votes, which is overseas votes that are hard to verify in terms of the source. That you can't really ID someone properly to find out if they're registered in a state. And I think it's now been admitted publicly that in 2020, Iran hacked that system and was able to process 100,000 Vocava votes using fake IDs and use it against Trump. And we now know also that the corrupt head of the cybersecurity, Christopher Krebs, and the corrupt head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, both knew about it and lied about it. They covered it up for 4 years. But now it's out. And yeah, they could do it again. They probably will do it again. In Michigan, the corrupt Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has fought against the state Republican Party and the Republican National Committee attempt to insist on more strict verification of these so-called Vocava votes. And in the case of Michigan, apparently they don't even have to be in the state of Michigan to vote that way. And the Democratic Committee has spent a large sum of money, I think $100 million, trying to promote and gather overseas votes for only the battleground states. So, they are up to the same tricks. They are doing the same things. But I don't think it's going to work. Because
it isn't going to work because the electorate has changed.
Yes. Some of those Vocava votes would go for Trump.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the fact that Trump is doing so well with the Black Hispanic votes, the fact that you probably can't find a male who will admit to be voting for Harris She got a terrible problem with men, and
especially
like I
black
said,
men.
yes,
They all know that she kept black men predominantly in prison longer than they needed to be in California, so that her corporate interests, who are contributing to the Democratic Party, can get slave labor longer.
yeah,
Right? Most black men know this, and they understand it, and that the record is not good there. I think that's gotten out, and so yeah, she has a problem with men. She's got a problem with even younger people, apparently.
oh,
Um,
she's really losing at least the young male vote.
yeah,
And I'll just point out with this blackmail thing. I mean, here's an obvious point. If anybody's going to know what a black woman is, it's a black man,
right.
and she ain't no black woman. Okay.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of questions about her ethnic background. I mean, though, everything about her is fake.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Candace Owens has done a very good job of like really going deep into Kamala Harris's ethnic background. She found out that in her autobiography or in the public relations, she shows a picture of herself as a young woman with a black older woman claiming that that's her grandmother. It's not.
No.
Her grandmother
Yeah.
was white. I mean, it's a complete lie. And Candace Owens has done a pretty good deep dive on really what's going on. I mean, her father came from the largest slave owning family in Jamaica, the Brown family. And she really, maybe there's some African background, but who cares? It's not really real. It's not anything relevant to her. She says she grew up middle class. She grew up rich, and she grew up in Canada.
Well,
And
she lived in Westmont, which is the premier suburb of or area of Montreal.
yeah,
But I'll tell you, maybe you can explain this to me and your viewers who may wonder. What I don't understand in all this nonsense and lies is why are the Democrats acting as if it's still 1951 and you could pull this? It's pretty simple to find out information. I mean, admittedly, Candace Owens had to dig a little bit, but
right.
dig you can. So how do they think they can get away with this any more than additional stuff coming out on Dougie? And the woman went to
Right.
the Daily Mail with more accusations. I
There's
wish.
a lot of dirt on him, and
Yeah.
I think that they thought they could control the internet, but that's failing thanks to Musk, whom they're trying to put in jail. They're
Yeah.
trying to charge him with a crime. Now they're, of course, as we reach the final miserable hours of this corrupt, illegitimate regime, they are resorting to the worst kind of, agitprop, and that is the Trump is Hitler thing, right? Trump is Hitler. It's been going on for 8 years. Really? I mean, this is like, it's so low. I mean, it shows how desperate they are. But yeah, she gives a special press conference yesterday without taking questions, of course, from the media, where she goes on about how Trump is secretly like a fascist. They're not even offering anything real to back that up. There's no.
They do have, and this appeared in the New York Times and I believe the Atlantic, this unsourced article by your friend Jeffrey Goldberg.
Completely debunked. Yeah, that's been not only. I mean, you're talking about what Trump made a comment about admiring the Nazi generals.
Right.
Well, first of all, I wonder which Nazi generals. I think some of them really were quite good, like Rommel, for example, who Winston Churchill noted had the Nazis listened to him, they probably would have won the war. I mean, some of them were great generals.
Well, here's the point, though, that since there were 15 assassination attempts on Hitler, all involving generals, I'm not sure that.
The point is that this is enough to prove that he loves the Nazis. I mean, it's like that. Therefore, he's an anti-Semite. I mean, it's absurd, and it's by the way not even true, because I think it's Mike Esper, Assistant Secretary of Defense, who hates Trump, an anti-Trump guy, he came out and said, "I was at those meetings, and this is bullcrap. This
Yeah.
didn't happen." So
Well,
I mean,
and here's the thing. I think the biggest mistake that Trump made in his first term was populating it with generals, because evidently, like all good Americans, he thought that the military was still like World War II,
right.
where you had these heroic generals, and without, I guess, recognizing that now they're nothing more than feckless bureaucrats.
Yeah, and they're also hacks. I mean, like in the case of Milley, I mean, the guy was a complete hack from the Obama era. He didn't even go to West Point. I think he graduated Princeton. He was a desk jockey.
Yeah.
Not that Eisenhower wasn't. That's putting that aside.
Yeah. Yeah.
The point is that he was one of the worst. I mean, he practically was treasonous. He was during the Kristallnacht after George Floyd's death. He accompanied Trump to make a public appearance to try to bring out some calmness by standing in front of St. John's Church across the street from the White House, a church that had been services had been attended by every single American president, starting with Madison, and was burned by these rioters. And then he turns on Trump afterwards and sends out these leaks about Trump making various comments and just cheap garbage. But what's worse is that he informed his Chinese counterparts that he was in charge and not to worry about anything behind the back of the commander-in-chief. I mean, putting in a mild sense, I mean, MacArthur was fired by Truman for a lot less than that. This is, the military can't, this isn't a military regime. That's almost a coup. And there's some other things on him that are not good.
Well, I can't let you even make the fleeting comparison between MacArthur and Milley, but the point being that the currency on generals has been considerably devalued, and I don't think that Trump recognized that. I believe he thought that he would put these people in who would have this, they obey orders and they do their thing and so on. But in fact, the only one of any of these guys who had integrity whatsoever was the last commandant of the Marine Corps, who resigned rather than turn it in to a PC enterprise.
Yeah, I think there was they like to talk about Nazis. I think that they purged the military of any patriotic figures. I mean, and they replaced them with, now you've got cross-dressers and you've got all this kind of PC crap, and it's become like a social experiment. And I think
people aren't going to like this, but I think it has to be heard. When's the last time they won anything? I mean, really? Okay.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the Afghanistan thing was a complete debacle, obviously. I mean, under Trump, I think that there was some good military activities against ISIS.
Yes.
Hopefully, look, at God willing, if Trump wins, there will be a restoration of America's traditional posture, which is peace through strength and non-interventionism. Not engaging in entangling alliances around the world, not nation building, but yet maintaining enough strength that we can do whatever we have to do in the case of an emergency. I think that Trump, it looks like with the early vote, he's crushing it. He's Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, even Michigan.
Well, Michigan is now saying that they're not going to be able to complete tallying on election day.
Yeah, not just Michigan. I think there are three of the battleground states are saying that, which is disgusting. I mean, first of all, I mean, it's ridiculous.
These ballots coming in, but somehow we can't count them until election day. So it's just a terribly corrupt system.
Well, I mean, I think Maricopa County is saying it's going to take them 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, it was the first time this ever happened was in 2020, and that was under the excuse of COVID, which is not there anymore. And New York, California, Texas,
Yeah.
these are big states. They get it done within hours. What the hell is the matter with, it's so obviously rotten. I don't think it's going to matter because I think that Trump is going to win by such margins that they can count all the hell they want. They could take another couple of years to finish counting. It's not going to matter. Trump will have the electoral votes and it'll be done. They can go F themselves.
Well, I mean, as I said from the outset, cheating only works if it's close. What they should have done and what they didn't do, and I think you've argued with me in the past, there's no talent on that side. It's the same old stuff, and if the old playbook doesn't work, well, we'll just keep doing it anyway. So
they don't seem to have any new tricks,
No. The biggest.
I mean, if they try to pull another white van up to the voting building in Detroit, that's going to be surrounded by people filming and taking pictures, and hopefully banging, standing in front of that car, and not letting it go. I don't think that they're going to, the drop boxes, people are going to be filming and watching those. There were enough films that did come out last time. It was too late. Dinesh D'Souza published a movie, 2000 Mules, where he showed people stuffing the ballot boxes, and pulling up and literally, putting them, 50, 60 ballots, shoving them in, and probably getting paid X number of dollars per ballot. I don't think they're going to get away with that this time.
No, I think people are fed up. I mean, they should use the Dick Daley model, but they didn't. Okay, and the Dick Daley model, of course, is you can be corrupt as you want, except you got to give something to the people. All right, and what happened in Dick Daley Chicago was it was a political machine, but the city ran. The crime was much lower. So okay, I'm the corrupt leader of Chicago, but Chicago works and people put up with it. But if you remove that other part of the equation, well, no, I'm just corrupt and you're getting screwed, and that's the way it's going to be. People don't like that. All right.
I think that's a good analogy. I remember when Boston had the so-called Big Dig, the depressing of the lottery. It took like 15 years to do this, and it cost like $15 billion. It was the most extensive public works project, they say, since the pyramids. And it was as corrupt as hell. And the analogy was that Chicago had a similar project that only took like 3 years, and it was corrupt as hell also. However, it was a good tunnel. It worked well. It was.
That was well.
They put in like modern facilities, unlike Boston. They actually use good quality tile and good products. They didn't just put in like cheap low grade cement that leaked afterwards. I mean, they actually did the job right. But I mean, they were corrupt, but at least the people of Chicago got something in return.
Well, that was it. That was the difference. I happen to have been involved in the Big Dig project, and it originally came in
Boston.
Yeah. We had some instruments on that. Here was the funny part, because the 15 billion is a correct figure, but what you may not know, it was originally estimated at 2 billion.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah,
I remember, who was it? Boohoo Karasiotis. He's there crying. They're in an interview, and but he ended up. I think he dodged prison years later. But
when do you remember on the portion of the Ted Williams tunnel?
Yes,
they rolled Ted Williams out to this thing, and he was going to emerge from the tunnel, and they nearly lost him in there on some land, and it was bad news.
Oh man,
yeah.
I mean, it's all finally working okay now, but it was like it was such a, the process is something that really requires a book to be written about it. And at that time, Jerry Williams, the talk show host, my mentor, he was fired from WRKO because he was pointing it out, and they wouldn't have that. I mean,
No.
it was one of the first, kind of the beginning of what we now have, which is Hitler-like censorship on the part of this rotten, illegitimate regime. They want to talk Hitler. I'll talk Hitler. We could take a look at who's, I mean, last night I watched Bill Maher because I have to, and he had on that knucklehead Morning Joe as one of the guests. Him and Kuban.
It gets worse and worse and worse.
Oh, and he, it's. I don't think it's really working for them. It was a classic case of projection in his say. Well, Trump is calling for imprisoning his opponents. This is proof of his fascism. He wants to censor. Everything that he said is exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
They've tried to put Trump in prison. They are imprisoning Steve Bannon. They're keeping him in prison longer than his sentence just because they want to hold him. It's out of spite, and it's out of the fact that they don't want him to get any ability to talk about anything before the election. I mean, they put, for God's sakes, they put Owen Schroyer in prison. I mean, the guy was a reporter standing near the lawn. I think his foot might have touched the lawn of the Capitol building. And he ended up having to do like a 3-month prison sentence.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about Nazis? Fine. Let's take a look at, the censorship, the imprisonment of the opposition, the people who questioned the election were treated like Untermenschen. I can speak to that. Like you were less than human. The media didn't look into that. Instead, they totally demonized anyone who questioned it in a way that is very reminiscent of the Nazi treatment of their political opponents. So, for them to now trot this out 2 weeks before Election Day, I'd like to think that it's just desperation. They've got nothing else. And this is the final Hail Mary, Other than that, maybe I've heard rumors that they're going to pull something else. I don't know. There's some big October surprise that, I think that whatever it is, I would guess they've done it by now. I don't know.
The joke last week was that the October surprise they pulled on themselves by having Kamala be on Bret Baier's show.
Right, which was bad.
I will maintain they simply don't have the talent. And why do I say that? Because if you come out with the same playbook again and again and again, no new ideas, go back to the well every time. Here's
Bill Maher was tossing her under the bus on that one. He was like, he said that Bret Baier was a jerk and all of that, but nevertheless, he was asking some ordinary questions you'd ask any presidential candidate, and her answer was, "Oh, it's all because Trump's worse. Everything was about Trump," and it just didn't fly. People are like, "What about what you stand for? What about? Can you say anything that about It's like Trump derangement and Trump hatred." It's just, they're out there, and you and I know them, but that's not going to be enough for them to win. And I think those numbers
because every 4 years, younger people come into the market, so to speak, and they don't know that they're supposed to hate Trump because, okay, and so when questions come up like, why did we send $200 billion to Ukraine? Why are all these illegals coming in? It's not part of the, if you will, tikkun olam of the Democratic Party, a platform that you must accept. And you can see it when Charlie Kirk is talking to these college students. In so many cases, they have all these fixed ideas based on, stories my uncle told me, and there's just no there, and they haven't changed the playbook since your old buddy Franklin Roosevelt. It's the same thing.
Well, they're even dumber now. I mean, you talk about Charlie Kirk's tour of the colleges. Him and Ramaswamy are there setting up a tent and interviewing people. It's hilarious. You got to watch. You got to see this. And these people are just like looking blankly, like a deer in the headlights. I mean, it's like, what is it that you admire about Harris? Can you name something? What is it that you admire about? What do you hate about Trump? And they just are. They're there. It's so dumb. It's like it's embarrassing, really, to watch them start to blather. I mean, we've been talking about this for years. They've got nothing. It's like they're just they have no way to articulate why they hate Trump. I mean, I talked about this with someone that I know just the other day. Well, because of abortion. Really? Well, first of all, what do you mean abortion? He appointed those 3 conservative judges. I mean, when you have a Republican president, you're going to have conservative judges. When you have a liberal Democratic president, you'll have liberal judges. That's part of the way the system works. And that, if you really want to talk about getting rid of Roe versus Wade, what did Biden and Harris do about it? Nothing. It happened under their watch. They did nothing. If they wanted to do something, they could have at least tried. They did nothing about it because we found out that that law was unconstitutional and there was nothing they could do. But it's like, so they're angry over that. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Well, what they could have done is they could see the writing on the wall, and not that they're going to change the Supreme Court decision, but they can rally the troops to work at grassroots, make sure it's still legal in your state or whatever.
Exactly. That's the point.
They didn't do any of that. They just complained, and I think made this a bigger issue than I think it is in reality.
I think you're right. I mean, it's a state issue. I think that this business of women becoming ill and dying because of an unwanted pregnancy, I don't know this. I haven't done a deep dive in it, but I have a feeling that that's untrue. I mean, first of all, nobody,
and during the heyday of Roe v. Wade, they started making up these figures that there's 20,000 women every year that die of botched abortions and so on. And it turns out when someone actually looked into it, the number, as could be verified at all, was something like 25. Okay.
Well, I'm not talking about botched abortions. I'm talking about their claim, and Lester Holt, who I have to watch. They've done several big stories on this. They'll find a woman who said, I was having a difficult pregnancy and I needed to have an abortion, but I couldn't get one in my state and I could have died. And yet then at the end of the segment, they show that she had a baby and that she loved the baby. But the point is that it does bring up the question of, is this true? I mean, are women really dying because they can't get an abortion in those states? I don't believe that. I mean, maybe you could find some rare case, or is it true that doctors won't do an abortion if a woman has to have one because they're afraid they could be charged with murder?
No, I know. I think there's several factors here. All right. They turned this into a huge issue. And when I challenge people, how many abortions per year are you going to get? I mean, why is this such a fundamentally large issue as opposed to the price of food, price of gasoline, rent, whatever, okay? This was always an overblown issue in my judgment, but it was a great divisive issue. So once they achieved in 73 with Roe v. Wade, which was an absurd case from the beginning. She already had the baby. What's her interest? There's no case in history where the plaintiff has no interest in the case.
Well, of course, unless it's Trump, but putting that aside, but yes.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's very, very rare that a woman, first of all, abortion itself used to be extremely rare. But in a case where, especially with modern technology being what it is, a woman has to have an abortion or she's going to die. I think that's extremely rare. And of course, if that is the case, then, I mean, I remember there was a case, I don't know, I think it was in California, where this woman went into a Catholic hospital and she clearly had to have an abortion or she was going to die. And the doctor, who was a nun, performed the abortion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she was excommunicated, which was fine with her. She's like, okay, she understood that, but she did what she had to do. But that's extremely rare. I mean, and I think in those cases, they're going to get the abortion.
Well, I mean, technically, it wouldn't really be an abortion in that sense. You're performing life-saving surgery for the mother.
Right.
And that's now lumped in as an abortion.
Yeah, but the problem is that the left has reinterpreted life of the mother to include the mental condition of the mother, which is not, which has even been weakened from that. She's not going to go insane because she's pregnant. I mean, I think that's pretty rare. But it's further defined to say it's going to hurt her emotional joy, or to have a baby. It's going to somehow damage it. She doesn't feel ready to have the baby yet because maybe she doesn't have the right career or whatever reason. And so therefore it's the life of the mother. That becomes the definition. And of course you got left-wing Jews who have totally misrepresented Judaism when they say that, which Judaism does support an abortion if the life of the mother is at risk. And we might be a little more liberal about that than Christianity. However, these leftists are saying, well, the life of the mother means whatever she says it is, whatever the doctor says it is. And that's where it's a problem. It's not, it really isn't the life of the mother. She became pregnant. She chose to, I mean, other than if she was raped, that's the way it is. And, she could give birth and have the baby adopted. I mean, people would love to, there's a big urge, need for adopting babies. Anyway.
Well, I think it's always been an overblown wedge issue. And they've gotten some good traction on it. I mean, let's be honest. When it starts throwing into women's rights, reproductive rights. Well,
but how much is this going to resonate with women? I mean, a war on women. First of all, I think that probably close to 50% of women are opposed to abortion and opposed to unlimited abortion. I mean, the what's this? Concerned Women for America. It's 5 times bigger than NARAL and those groups, and they're anti-abortion. Susan B. Anthony, I mean, historically, anti-abortion. That was one of her main causes. Abortion was being abused by men who wanted to get rid of their responsibility by forcing their pregnant girlfriends to have abortions. Right. It was defending the woman and stopping this that was a major cause for the women of the late 19th century who wanted equal rights, who wanted the vote. They were anti-abortion, across the board. So, anyways, I mean, I wonder now if this is still a potent enough issue with women to.
They're trying to make it more than it is, because all you have to do, and I don't recommend it, but if you do get into some argument with some young woman, okay, so she doesn't know about the pill, she doesn't know about birth control methods, she doesn't know about the morning after pill. I mean, come on, okay? And the fact that in the Black community, abortion is virtual genocide in terms of the number of minority babies that are being destroyed by this.
Well, they've always been targeted, including by so-called conservatives. I mean, I think I've mentioned that when I ran for Congress, I had a prominent Republican woman in Massachusetts, who I still can't mention her name because I promised I wouldn't, contacted me and said, you have to support abortion rights. Why? Because it's a good way to cull the population of certain races,
Right.
basically, is what she was saying. Certain undesirable people. They're having too many babies. It's a burden on society. And I think that's probably the Margaret Sanger school, and it includes a lot of right-wing and conservative people who who had race motivations for this.
There's
They
still some
want
of that out there.
there is, the Planned Parenthood was fixed up in black neighborhoods. I mean, there's a reason for that. I mean, the Negro Project of 1939, Margaret Sanger, backed by the Rockefellers, by the way, figured the best way to get abortions in the black community was to bribe black ministers, and she did corrupt the black church with money so that they would preach
That's
about
a
it.
whole subject on its own, the quote black church, but
Yeah,
uh,
which at one time was probably one of the most potent moral Christian churches in America, right? I mean, it became corrupted, I think, possibly by that issue. I don't know, by some other issues. It was used
when
by
it
this establishment.
when it became a political functionality, uh, it started becoming more prone to corruption,
Right.
which and there were, in the campaign of Bob Dornan, when he finally lost,
Yeah.
the opponent, whose name Loretta Sanchez, who suddenly
Right.
discovered that she was going to use the name Sanchez, started
I know.
campaigning.
She all of a sudden found out that she was Hispanic.
That she started campaigning in Catholic churches in Orange County, which is inappropriate to say the least.
Sure.
And so when politics comes into that, it's going to turn it bad. And in the case of Doran, he got screwed. He was the first major candidate who got absolutely shafted by voter fraud, and Republicans didn't do anything about it. There were illegals that voted in that election.
Yeah.
And, they admitted that the only reason they didn't do anything about it is that they wanted to continue to pander, I guess, to the Hispanics, although they never did. I mean, the only Republican candidate that did anything with the Hispanics is Trump, and that's many, many years later.
But the question is, are they going to do anything now about illegal aliens voting?
Well, I
think
don't
that,
know. I mean, I think this assumption that legitimate Hispanic citizens are in favor of illegal aliens is just a crock.
it is a crock, and they're actually the recent data shows that Republicans have made huge inroads in the Hispanic community, almost to the point where it's about a 50-50.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
The question is, what about the illegal aliens? I mean, there's already cases. I think that James O'Keefe has done some work on this. You've got other people exposing this, that illegal aliens are on the ballot. And of course they are, because if you get a license, you can get on the ballot in Massachusetts. And they don't even necessarily know they're on the ballot. When you get a license, or when you get a Social Security number,
you mean on the voter rolls? On the voter rolls.
I mean on the voter rolls. Then you can have some corrupt bureaucrat put your name into the voting rolls, and you don't even know it.
Right.
And I think that there was a lot of that last time. I'm sure it's going on now. I mean, Massachusetts, they practically admitted this. Now, who actually cast those votes? Who knows? I mean, for an illegal alien to actually cast that vote, that's a felony. They could be in a lot of trouble. So that means someone else is casting that vote.
Yes.
I don't know how pervasive that is. I'm worried about that. I think that Trump can overcome it just by the sheer volume of people. I've even seen someone suggest that the early vote is so much in Trump's favor that he could even win the election before election day. And not literally, but in terms of like he's going for the popular vote now, not even the electoral college. And I mean, it just has to be so big that they can't pull it off. And I don't feel totally settled that they won't. Who knows what might happen?
They're going to try to do something, but they screwed up in that they have a extremely unlikable candidate. There's no way they could put a lipstick on a pig there. I mean, it just isn't working, no matter what they try to do.
But they might come up with some kind of. I mean, look, the October surprise thing. It's not what I mean. Like I remember when George W. Bush. That kind of October surprise they pulled on him, that wouldn't work now because nobody cares either side. That he had a drunk driving incident when he was a teenager, big deal. I mean, it's like, really? I remember that. I mean, 1 week before the election, DWI, George Bush, when he was a teenager in Portland, Maine, in Kennebunk, Maine, and there was a lawyer, oh, it was hilarious, this kind of moth-eaten hippie-looking lawyer, who had that information, and he was sitting on it for years, waiting for the right moment. And he released it 1 week before the election. And somebody went up to interview him. The guy looked practically homeless, but he had this shit-eating grin, like, like I finally did it.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. I mean, but the point is that if they did that now, it wouldn't even make the newspaper. Who cares? Really? No kidding. Sure, he had DWI when he was a teenager. Everybody kind of figured, we kind of assumed that. It's like, so, but yeah, so it's going to have to be something bigger, something more sensational. I mean, I've heard rumors that they've got something to do with Trump and Epstein. But the point, I think that if there was anything to that, it probably would have been known by now. I mean, I don't think they could have sat on that one. I mean, they've been talking about that one for since Epstein was died under mysterious circumstances in prison. And Trump's answer to that is that he hated Epstein. He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago when he found out that he was hitting on one of his waitresses. And that's his story. Now, did something else happen? I think if it did, then we'd know about it by now. Already, The Atlantic did a piece saying that 30 years ago, Trump groped a stewardess, and it's been immediately debunked. It didn't fly. It's like that kind of stuff. I mean, is that what they're going to hold on to? There's something everyone is saying, and I think we're going to have to hold our breath until election day, that they've got something that they're going to release between now and then that has to be so big and so devastating that it's going to really change the.
Yeah, but think about it. If something was that big and that devastating, how come no one would know about it?
Well, that's my thought. I mean, if there was something like that, it would have already happened. I mean, look they tried to shoot him. They tried to put him in prison. I mean, there's been 5 lawsuits. I mean, why wouldn't they have done it already? So I don't think so. I mean, unless it's going to be something that happens on the geopolitical front, something maybe there's rumors that the cybersecurity of this country is not great. Maybe they could take it down for a day or two just before the election. You have these software companies that we're not going to even mention the name of the big one that has actually said that anybody who questions us is going to get in big trouble. People have already gotten in big trouble for questioning them. They're powerful. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Are they going to pull something else? I mean, I don't know. We know they were online when you had this recent kind of correction done by Google. It was about a month ago when airports had to shut down for like a few hours. You had hotels, you had computers that weren't functioning for about 24 hours because they did some kind of a correction. People did not know, it's not as well known, that there was a special election that day in Maricopa County, and they had to shut down the election because it was affected by this software. Now, the only way it could have been affected by the software, and I'm not an expert on this at all, would be if those election machines had been online, because everything online had, was affected. And yet, in 2020, anyone who suggested that was demonized as being lower than low. I mean, like the worst form of life if you suggested such a conspiracy theory. Of course, they weren't online. Well, we now know that they were online.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have been affected.
Remember, the experience of 2020 was, and with COVID, that the whole demonization process doesn't work so well anymore. Because, again, they jumped the shark.
Now they're trying to do it with Trump and Hitler. I don't think it's going to fly. I think it's too late. It's too little. Most people don't buy it.
It's too stupid.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. One is that I don't think you're going to convince anybody new. The other thing is, and people don't like hearing this, that the knowledge of American history by contemporary youth is so abysmally bad that I bet you could stop 5 out of 10 kids. They couldn't even tell you, other than they have heard the name Adolf Hitler, anything about him.
That's right. I know it's kind of lost its cachet.
Yeah.
And of course they're still working the January 6th, attempt to try to overthrow the government with the guy with the fake buffalo horns. I mean, I don't think that people are buying it. I don't think people care. It's you get Liz Cheney out there. I mean, people don't believe this. It's just, it hasn't worked for them. They've been doing that one.
I mean, as I pointed out, and I asked the question in my latest article called "Gaslighting for Fun and Profit." One of the questions I ask is, why is everything considered one-off? In other words, just some stupid BS comes out, and then you go on to the next one, and more stupid BS comes out. At what point do you say, you know what? I'm not going to believe a goddamn thing you say ever again. End of story.
And I think that's happening. I think that the mainstream media has reached such a low in terms of credibility and respect that, they go out practically every night with another hoax against Trump, another bullcrap story that then kind of vanishes into the ether the next day. And that technique isn't working for them now. It's not making any difference. They've got their loyal.
Do they realize that?
And they don't have that kind of control over the media, because even with the censorship, people can do a little research and find out whether or not this thing is true. People have gotten used to doing that. Even with Google, as bad as it is, you can still Google something and do a little bit of digging, but you can get to the nuances of the story. I mean, I remember when they came out with the hoax that Trump had a Muslim ban. Remember that?
Right.
A little Googling and you could find out that that was bullcrap. The 7 nations that were put on that list, I think 4 of them were Muslim majority, 3 of them were not, and that Obama was putting nations on that list also. It's basically a temporary stop that usually runs anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half of nations that are not doing a sufficient job of vetting potential terrorists entering the United States. It didn't matter whether they were Muslim. And the fact is that the biggest Muslim nations in the world, in terms of population, Indonesia, Egypt, Bangladesh, they weren't on that list.
Right.
So, I mean, people realized that it was another hoax, I think pretty quickly, other than the real yahoos who still are touting that lie. But I don't think that in the aggregate, these things have worked. Trump
they haven't worked, and I think you're right that slowly the notion of authoritarianism is falling apart. All right, that I mean, I've argued this for a long, long time before COVID, that I thought the public health agencies were terrible. No one should listen to anything they say, and so on. And I was very frustrated by how everything was one off. Well, Mike, we believe you about this. But now the CDC says, well, wait a minute. Why should you believe them? Well, they made a mistake. All right. How many mistakes do you get to make before you're not credible anymore?
I think that people recognize that most of the stuff about COVID was a lie, and a conscious, deliberate lie at that. And yet you still have people. I mean, I saw a few of them at my synagogue the other day. They're still wearing the masks.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know if you see this, but I feel like saying something to them, but I'm not going to.
Well, it becomes this paternalistic situation that maybe part of them realizes they've been lied to, but if they fully admit that, then in a sense their life is over, right? That I invested so much into believing this, and now you're pointing out that I was wrong. I mean, Wilson Bryan Key, who wrote a book called Subliminal Seduction, that
Sure, yeah,
all right, tells the story when he was at, I believe it was Western Ontario University. There was an art professor who he'd been friends with for 30 years. And in his book, he describes a Picasso painting, The Dream, where you look at it for 5 seconds and you realize that it had, to be polite, a masturbatory theme in it.
Yes, I get it.
All right. Now, the point is that he mentions this to his friend, who's an art professor. The art professor reacts in a way he describes. Suddenly, there is where the scales fall from his eyes. He realized that he had been wrong about this painting for his entire career. And the way he reacts is he turns his back on his friend of 30 years, never speaks to him again.
Right.
All right. And I think that dynamic is happening here more than people like to think.
That's a great story because, yes, that's right. People, I mean, there's this guy at my synagogue who still has the full mask, and he comes to synagogue with his young son, who's probably 18, and he makes him wear the full mask.
Yes.
And that's not even healthy. I mean, you're inhaling millions of particles of like plastic. How could they do this? And it's almost like abuse. It's just, I mean, it's and it's not even a liberal thing anymore either, because most of the liberals I know are not wearing the mask anymore. I mean, it's just, and these people are ultra liberal, I'd note. But I mean, it's like, I know that there's a contingency of Jews, young Jews, who are anti-Zion. They call themselves anti-Zionists. They were against Israel, and they wear the mask. But they're not claiming that they're wearing it because of COVID. They're wearing it for political. There's like a political thing, which is disgusting. But that's what they're doing. I mean, it's like
because they're functional atheists and they worship authority rather than God. And now you're undermining their love of authority. And I've often talked about inductive reasoning, and the reason that the powers that be hate inductive reasoning is you could start making very dangerous conclusions. Once you see that the public health people were lying to you about COVID, then you start wondering, what else are they lying to you about? And
well, I think that played a major role in the discrediting of the media and of this rotten regime in Washington, and the lies about for years about the jab, about Biden's health. Everybody could see that, but yet they continue to lie. And now finally, Harris, who can't finish a full sentence that has any actual logic to it or has any kind of like functionality other than hate Trump. It's caught up to them. And hopefully, God willing, they're going to be swept into the ash bins of history in a matter of 2 weeks. I can hardly wait. It's going to be a glorious and great moment. And
well, here's something even more glorious and great for you. All right, let's say Harris loses. All right. You're a media guy. What happens to her after this?
The same thing that happened to Michael Dukakis. She'll be swept away and forgotten. And they won't ever want to look at her again, is what will happen to her. Dukakis became like a leper after he lost that election. Nobody wanted to go near him. I mean, he's a nice guy, by the way. I've met him many times. He was, it was horrible, actually. I mean, they moved him out. He wanted to moderate a debate between Boston mayoral candidates, and they wouldn't even talk to him.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't want to be seen in the same camera angle with him. He became like a non-person.
Well, what did he end up doing? He was a professor or something.
He ended up becoming a professor at Northeastern University, where he bored students to death, with these lectures. And I think that's how he finished his career. Recently, they trotted him out to make a few comments. I mean, in 2004, John Kerry made sure that he did not go to the Democratic convention, which was held in Boston, by the way.
Yeah.
And Kerry was Dukakis's lieutenant governor. In his biography, he didn't mention this. He didn't mention the name Dukakis. Dukakis was airbrushed, very Stalin-like. He was told, "You're not invited, don't come." He was airbrushed out of the pages of history. So I think that's what's going to happen to Harris. They're going to forget her. They're just going to move on. There'll be 1 or 2 days.
It's sad in a way because Dukakis was not this repugnant sort of personality.
He was okay. I mean, it was nothing. He was an ordinary Democratic candidate. I mean, he wasn't, I'm glad I didn't support him, but, he wasn't he wasn't awful like she is, or Biden. He was normal. I mean, he was like a regular person. He wasn't this weird kind of hologram of a person. He did have some substance to him. He did have a record as a governor. So I think that's what's going to happen to her. She'll be just swept off the pages of history, and so won't Biden. Biden might get a last laugh. I don't know. We'll see. Because if Trump wins, it'll be Biden who's going to meet him at the White House. And, I think that there's no love.
What a great scenario that is. What a great scenario that is.
Let's not get too giddy about this. I mean, it's not over yet.
Just for a minute. They're buddy. And then Joe turns to him and said, "Donald, I voted for you, man.
I want to pardon me and my family." I think that there's no love lost there, and I think that Biden is undermining Harris every chance he could get. He doesn't, they're not going to support her. Even the Clintons aren't supporting her. I mean, just Bill Clinton. I mean, he threw her under the bus.
The support she's not getting, and then the support that she is getting from within the party is pretty weak. I mean, you may have read the governor of New Mexico, this horrible individual that tried to ban guns.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's apparently in some parts of the state, there's some flooding. And instead of coming to the location of floods, she goes campaigning with Harris, somehow thinking that her terrible self is going to be invited to the adult table in the Democrat Party. It's pathetic. Just pathetic.
They said that New Mexico might flip to Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, nobody wants to be seen with her. I mean, Tammy Baldwin in
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin has a tight race. Harris did a rally there. She didn't. She was nowhere to be found.
Right.
You know, that's really pretty bad because you know when the candidate for your party shows up, you know, you're on stage with them. The Los Angeles Times is not endorsing Harris,
For
and
the
the
first time,
editor-in-chief has resigned.
first time in decades. And I don't know that they articulated very well why, other than the Korean owner of the LA Times, you know, hates her, but he didn't say that
Right.
directly.
But
So
that's
that's a
pretty
big
big
deal.
for a major newspaper like that to not endorse the Democratic nominee, and
Well,
and then
that's
of
a
course,
huge deal because I'm old enough to remember
yeah,
when I was in high school, the LA Times was a conservative newspaper.
right,
And what happened was when the fair-haired boy, Otis Chandler, took over, he
yeah.
decided that he wanted to sit at the adult table. So he completely changed the LA Times to becoming a liberal newspaper.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
no, that happens to the Chicago Tribune also.
yeah,
It was a virulently anti-communist
yeah,
against FDR. They've become liberal. I mean, that's just what happens. But they're not like jumping up and down for her.
no, no.
It's
Nobody.
really no. I mean, it's really like the all indications are that it's over.
Now,
You
who
know,
is the Manchester
like
Union?
Terry Williams used to say, it's all over. It's over. Forget it. It's over. Now, I mean, I don't want to get too celebratory yet. Let's not break out the
No, no.
champagne.
Is the Manchester Union leader
Oh,
endorsing?
that's. I mean, yeah, the Loeb paper. No, they've gone liberal. Yeah, they're not what it was under Loeb.
No.
And New Hampshire is definitely a potential Trump state. I mean, unless they pull the same crap they do every 4 years, where they bust people over the border, and you know, New Hampshire has this special law that says that if you say that you intend to move to New Hampshire and you sign some documents stating that, you can register to vote. You have 30 days, and then you could rescind it later. I'm not kidding. And they
No, yeah.
do this, and they did it. And that's how they stopped Trump in 2020. And the Democratic Party in that state is extremely corrupt. I mean, they screwed Hillary. They screwed Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders in the primary won New Hampshire, but he
Yeah.
got 0 delegates. They all went to Hillary. I mean, it's like, why even have a primary? Why bother? You know,
What
it's
was
already
the justification for that? I remember
they
that. It
didn't
didn't
answer
make
those
any.
questions. Yeah. Oh, they just had some technical thing. I mean, that's how it goes. Hillary is the winner. You know, it's like in a boxing match, and there's a guy that's passed out, and they pull him up and they hold him up with the winner. You know, it was like it was completely corrupt.
What does
Anyway,
that say about Sanders, though? That he got bought off?
Sanders had no guts. Sanders should have stood up and said he I remember him saying in a debate, "I'm sick of hearing about the damn emails with regard to Hillary
Yeah.
destroying federal classified information, something she should have been, you know, facing charges for." And Sanders gave her a complete pass. He turned out to just be a tool of an insider, weak, weak person. I mean, it's not.
What a legacy for that schmuck, though, if you think about it. There
Yeah.
was this anti-establishment, commie type, radical, and he turns out to be bought
Well,
off so easily, right?
no, that's like Elizabeth Warren. I mean, these people are all phonies. And if they
Wow.
actually were leftists, I'd say fine, but they don't even have, they're just, they're tools. So, but anyway, Mike, I mean, I don't want to become too happy.
No, let's not get overconfident.
Let's just hold on and just urge people to get out and vote now. Don't wait for the election day. I'm going to be voting probably tomorrow. I want to get it done. I want to get your ballot in. Take a picture of your ballot when you go.
Can you tell us who you'll be voting for?
Yes, I can. I think we know who I'm voting for. Up and down the ticket, Republicans.
Yeah. All right.
and do a full ticket. You know, it's like I think that there's evidence now that the Republicans are going to not just take back the Senate, but I think with some numbers, there's going to be like 3 or 4 seats that are going to be a surprise. The House, I don't know about. I think that they might be able to hold on to it, but think of it this way: they better hold on to it, because if they don't, and you end up with Pelosi coming back, God forbid, or Adam Schiff, or some of these really rotten people,
Well, Schiff's running for
the Senate.
California.
Yeah, awful man, really, really rotten. George Soros, I think his son is married to George Soros' daughter, something. Anyway,
Yeah.
the point is that really bad news. If the Republicans don't take back both houses, there's going to be an impeachment every other day. They're going to do everything they can to stop Trump. Trump has to have both houses, even if the Republican that you're voting for is a rhino. Doesn't matter. Vote for the Republican, because if the Republicans have a majority in the House, then the patriotic wing of the Republican Party will be able to flex its muscle. Otherwise, forget it. You know, otherwise you're going to have Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker,
Oh,
right?
that
So
guy has considerable baggage. That's
he
never
does.
been emphasized.
There's never been those people. They in there for life. They never get any kind of, nobody can touch them. It's like it's like Ayanna Presley here in Boston. Nobody
Well,
will ever touch.
the original guy like that, of course, was Adam Clayton Powell.
Oh, is that right?
Probably
Yeah.
before your time, but
Yeah, exactly. They're in for life. Ted Kennedy was that, of course.
yeah.
By the way, I heard an interesting comment that the only reason why McGovern in '72 won Massachusetts was because his running mate was Sergeant Shriver, who was married to one of the Kennedy sisters. And at that time, the Kennedys had a lot of cachet in Massachusetts. I mean, I remember that the Kennedys were like worshipped almost like deities.
Right.
They were. I mean, my parents, people in my circles growing up, Kennedy was like, they were almost like superhuman. That's no longer the case, but maybe there might still be a few residual elements of that because of RFK Jr. I don't know. Maybe that might have some influence in Massachusetts. I don't know.
It's
Hello,
funny how
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll just, have to see how this turns out. But it's certainly looking better than it was a couple of months ago.
It is looking very, very good. I mean, I think that apparently, according to even the normie polls at this point, Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is key. That is the state that's going to
Keystone State.
Exactly. They decide the next president. Trump's already got Ohio pretty well wrapped up. So it's really comes down to Pennsylvania. Where Pennsylvania goes, and Pennsylvania, they've got this great ground game. I'm listening to this guy, Scott Pressler. He's been out there for a year, door to door, getting, registrations. And for the first time, the majority of counties in Pennsylvania have a majority of Republican registered. And the Democrats have lost a lot of ground. And I think that Pennsylvania is where it can happen. Even with the rotten, corrupt Philadelphia political machine, I think it could, that's what we have to watch. If people want to actually volunteer and get involved, go to Pennsylvania, contact Scott Pressler, go to help, if you can. I mean, that's where it's going to happen. All eyes are in Pennsylvania. And I think there's going to be a few other surprises in the works. Maybe there's even rumors that Trump could take Minnesota.
Now, what about New York and the Madison Square Garden rally?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I don't think Trump can win New York State, but he can do well enough. And he can pick up a few House seats in New York. Who knows? I mean, New York, look, they voted for, they voted for Reagan twice, I think.
Yeah.
And people are pretty pissed off about illegal aliens in Manhattan. People don't advertise the fact that they support Trump because of the ugliness around that. but in the sacred space of the voting booth, they're going to do it. They're going to pull the lever, hopefully, God willing. And maybe, can you imagine if Trump won New York? Oh my God. That would be a beautiful thing. Ha! I mean, I'm not even going to talk about Massachusetts. I think if Trump did better in Massachusetts, by the way, in 2020 than he did in 2015, 2016. Yeah, he actually did better. And a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Black people in Massachusetts are taking a good look at Trump. Who knows? I mean, he could. It would be great to see some inroads. I have a left-wing friend who says to me, "Why don't you move to one of the red states? You can do radio in one of the red states," they say to me. Well, maybe I won't have to move too far because I think that my own part of Boston might go red, that being West Roxbury. I think that there's going to be a lot of red cities and towns in Boston. There were last time, and I think that number is going to grow. So I won't have to travel too far to find my like-minded birds of a feather, as it were.
So the cradle of liberty returns to
exactly.
Boston.
God willing. Anyways, so Mike, listen, you've got a great Substack up. Check it out. It's listed here on the show. There's a link to it. And I guess next week will be just a few days closer to the election, so we'll see how it goes. If there's something really big happens, I might contact you to do another show, just because we might, or I might just go live. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I might get back into it. I think that after this election, God willing, I'm going to have more energy to do podcasting if everything goes right, and I'll be able to come out publicly as a Trump supporter finally. We'll see.